players on the SCG Tour.
Sultan mid-range. Big check on the turn 1 Llanowar Elves. See if Fighter Play has it. Just overgrown tomb for Abe Corrigan, but on the draw, Alex Hahn does have the elf. Branch Walker for Corrigan.
Gotta say, loving the basic forts here from Alex Hahn. That is originally an artwork from Odyssey. This is, I think, the 9th edition artwork.
Both players drawing some lands off of their Branch Walkers. Didn't have a Jade Light Ranger for Hahn, but we'll see how he's able to capitalize on the Llanowar Elf mana going forward. Turn 3 for Corrigan. 3 mana, Midnight Reaper, and then the Branch Walker will attack.
Yeah, I mean, in this matchup specifically, Midnight Reaper effectively says all your creatures are unblockable. Because at any point, if your opponent tries to start trading with those creatures, they're going to be losing on the card advantage front pretty hardcore. Alex Hahn, though, could potentially bust up that Midnight Reaper mid-combat with something like a Cast Down or even Assassin's Trophy at his own detriment. And that will potentially let him block and trade off Branch Walkers for no real side effect.
Just a tapped overgrown tomb on Hahn's side. Nothing big there. Corrigan connects again with the Branch Walker, and Ravenous Chupacabra takes care of the Llanowar Elves.
Yeah, it looks like Alex Hahn actually struggling to find blue mana here. Desperately needs it to unlock those multiple copies of Hydroid Crassus that are kind of sitting in his hand. Alex Hahn here playing something, Vraska Golgari Queen, something we don't see a whole lot out of these Sultan mid-range decks, but a very unique answer to something like Hydroid Crassus, as well as a really solid card against a lot of these lower-to-the-ground decks in the format.
Yeah, saw it take care of the Midnight Reaper there. Back on Corrigan's side, plenty of attackers. A cast down on the 1 blocker. Chupacabra and Branch Walker come across, take care of the Planeswalker, and knock Hahn to 14.
Yeah, it still looks like just black and green mana from Alex Hahn, a forest, multiple Crassus in hand, not able to unlock them quite yet.
Another attack for Corrigan with the 2 Branch Walkers and the Chupacabra. Trades with the Llanowar Elf with 1 Branch Walker, and the following up is Vivian Reed. That's going to plus here. Hahn is at 10, and Watery Grave is the pickup off the Vivian. He'll play that tapped.
Yeah, the problem here is even if Alex Hahn's able to find the blue mana, which he does with Watery Grave, for this Hydroid Crassus, all it takes from Corrigan's side is a minus on the Vivian to destroy the Crassus and rebuy a lot of that tempo. The life gain and the card draw only matters so much if you're super far behind on the battlefield.
Yeah, flying actually kind of a drawback, because you see Vivian does take down the Crassus, and follow-up Carnage Tyrant for Corrigan against Hahn now at 6.
Yeah, and time again we see Carnage Tyrant being the deciding and dominating factor in these Golgari-based mirror matches. Alongside the effect of Find Finality, the finality aspect, Carnage Tyrant is a threat to be reckoned with and not something that either player is usually equipped to handle.
Jade Light Ranger for Hahn flips over another Jade Light Ranger and Wild Growth Walker. Those will both go to the bin. No additional action, though, just a 7th land. We're back on Corrigan's side. He'll plus his Vivian. There's a Hydroid Crassus. Corrigan really far ahead in this game.
Yeah, and if Alex Hahn has a Vraska's Contempt, he can stay alive at 1 life. Outside of that, I think that Abe Corrigan's going to take it down this turn. Yep.
And he does.
And that'll do it. And even if Alex Hahn did have the Vraska's Contempt, let me be clear, still going to lose that game.
Right.
Carnage Tyrant is a heck of a threat that you just don't really have a good answer to in this color combination. It's why over the last 4 months or so, we've seen Carnage Tyrant be such a major player out of these black-green base decks.
It's like a slippery bogle that comes with 3 auras already attached.
Right, and the fact that it has trample, it means in combat you need to be able to block it with a lot of creatures. You can't just chump block it forever. Against the control decks, it's uncounterable. And with Finality, you can make it significantly bigger while clearing off all the little blockers. So you take away the ability for them to kill it with a spot removal spell by Hexproof, and then you take away the ability for them to gang block it with a bunch of creatures with Finality. And it's just a perfect 1-2 punch.
So players are sideboarding here for game number 2. What is the general strategy? Where do you want your deck to be positioned in the matchup going into the sideboard games? You want to go bigger than the opponent?
Oh, absolutely. I think both players are going to have basically the same game plan after sideboard, where they're going to try to stick, well, never mind. It looks like Alex Hahn doesn't actually have access to Carnage Tyrant, as far as I can tell, out of his main deck or sideboard. So it'll be interesting to see just 1 copy in his sideboard, whereas Abe Corrigan looks like he has 1 main deck and then 1 in the sideboard. So just 1 more from Abe's side than Alex's side, but if Alex is able to draw his, could be the difference between winning and losing.
Yeah, early game, likely to see a bunch of trading on Explore creatures. I suppose Wild Growth Walker is the worst card for the matchup both players have brought, so those will be boarded out here.
interesting you would say that, and I agree to an extent. But Wild Growth Walker is one of the few creatures you can play in this mid-range mirror that actually can survive a finality.
True.
So in a situation where your opponent would play a finality, Wild Growth Walker could be the one creature that actually ends up surviving that finality and is still able to potentially rumble with the big Hexproof Carnage Tyrant. Now, with that said, any creature that you can play in a Golgari mirror that doesn't have an enters the play ability and is a pretty big target for something like Ravaged Chupacabra or even Hostage Taker is not really where you want to be. You want most of the bodies to be relatively disposable, as well as generate some amount of value along the way. And Wild Growth Walker doesn't do that in this matchup, which is why it is very commonly boarded out.
In the second game, Corrigan is the player who's going to be casting Llanowar Elves and just doing nothing with his mana as Alex Hahn goes to work with a couple Jadelight Rangers.
Yeah, being super reactive here in the mirror match, you can see it's really not working out so well for Abe Corrigan. If his hand is just a bunch of removal, he's just kind of sitting on, looks like a finality, and not a whole lot going on.
Hahn has drawn 3 lands off of those 2 Jade Lights, and the 2/1 ends up trading with the Llanowar Elf there, though now Hahn is a big follow-up. It's Vivian Reed, he'll plus that, and Carnage Tyrant's the find.
Yeah, and that's a huge find here, especially with multiple copies of Find Finality in hand. Alex Hahn looks like he's going to win this game because Abe Corrigan literally just drew 7 lands in a row.
Yeah, and he didn't explore into them. He paid the iron price for those ones.
Oh, that's a good reference.
I love that one.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks like both players flash through the sideboard. You can see Abe Corrigan's side. He's definitely got those Wild Growth Walkers over there on the board. I'm curious if Alex Hahn is doing the same thing. You know, I think that there is room for exploration in how to sideboard in these mirrors. No one has really found a better sideboard plan than just stall, Carnage Tyrant into Finality. And I'm curious if there is a potential configuration that allows you to do anything different.
Carnage Tyrant is just so low maintenance, right?
Yeah.
It's just a 6-mana spell. They can't counter it. They can't target it. Seems like you'd have to work a lot harder to do anything else.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. We've seen most of these Sultai midrange decks adopt 3 to 4 copies of Hydroid Krasis as its top end, effectively just replacing Carnage Tyrant in a lot of spots. But as you saw in game 1, Alex Hahn was the person casting the Hydroid Krasis. Abe Corrigan was the one casting the Carnage Tyrant. And guess who won? Not the guy who drew a bunch of cards and gained a few points of life.
Corrigan on the play. Turn 1 Llanowar Elves. Turn 2 Llanowar Elves. There is a second land in the hand. All right, here's a breeding pool tapped. This could get ugly.
Yeah, multiple copies of Llanowar Elf. One's going to require an answer. Casts out from Alex Hahn, takes it down. It's going to slow Abe down a bit. Let's see what the follow-up is.
Just an attack and a tapped Overgrown Tomb. Nothing scary just yet as we go back Hahn's way. He'll shock for a Watery Grave and
Plague Crafter.
Plague Crafter to take care of the Llanowar Elf.
Yeah, that's an interesting sideboard option from Alex Hahn. Occasionally when in the mid-range mirror where if you cast a Finality, you don't have the mana to follow it up with another creature. And most of your creatures get caught up in the crossfire. So following it up a Finality with a Carnage Tyrant with that Plague Crafter is a good way to get it off the battlefield. But as you can see early in the game, it's not that good. It just took care of a Llanowar Elves.
Corrigan used Find to pick up those 2 elves, redeployed them on Hahn's turn. He shocked to 14 to Hostage Taker one of the elves. We'll see what Corrigan has. There's a Forest at the front of the hand. Could have a 6-mana play this turn.
Yeah, my guess, he's taking pretty hard. It's either Carnage Tyrant or kill the Hostage Taker if he really needs the elf, but I feel like he wants to get that Carnage Tyrant down and start beating down and take those huge 7-point chunks out of Alex Hahn's life total. Alex, from all the shock lines, already at 14, can only really stand 2 full attacks before dying.
Yeah, and the Tyrant is where Corrigan lands for Hahn. Here's a Vraska, -3 to take care of Llanowar Elves. This is looking really bad for Hahn.
Yeah, this Carnage Tyrant actually can choose between eating half of Alex's life or eating the Vraska Golgari Queen, and I'm curious to see which one he picks. Whatever he picks, it's going to be solely based on what the rest of his hand can do.
Yeah, the plus on Vraska is kind of mopey. There's a question to how much it's even worth on Hahn's side of the table. If you can't take care of the Hostage Taker, though, that Llanowar Elves is kind of free food to draw cards, so interesting equation. I think, as you said, Corrigan just has to determine how much value is left over in his hand. If it's just Carnage Tyrant, he probably has to prioritize the value, but looks like he's attacking Hahn.
You also have to take into consideration the life gain on Vraska actually buys Alex 1 full extra turn of Carnage Tyrant attacks.
So Carnage Tyrant came across Han to 7, and Hydroid Krasis for 4 was the follow-up for Corrigan. Draws a couple cards, goes to 22.
Yeah, this is a really tough spot for Han. He can float a mana, plus the Vraska Golgari Queen, try to find a land that produces green, and then use that to cast Vivian Reed to take down the Krasis. Looks like he goes for casting the Llanowar Elf for black mana because of the Hostage Taker's ability, which still leaves some green mana to potentially cast a green spell from hand.
And he'll use Vraska to +2 to sacrifice his Hostage Taker. Draws a card, goes to 8. So Vraska's Contempt in the holding. That can answer the Krasis, and it does, though the Carnage Tyrant is still looming. Han's at 10.
Yeah, and Han doing that here effectively just to... doing it main phase to play around a potentially sideboard negate, or disdainful stroke. We don't see those that often in the mirrors because it's more about how you get on board, and the most important card in Carnage Tyrant is completely unaffected by that disdainful stroke.
Corrigan used Merfolk Branchwalker to draw a Watery Grave, and here's a Hostage Taker on that Llanowar Elf. Take that one back. Carnage Tyrant at Han. Han's at 3.
Yeah, and with effectively no real answers to Carnage Tyrant in his deck, in the color combination, Alex Han is going to need a lot to get out of this.
He's going to float a mana. Looks like he's thinking about using Vraska to sacrifice the land he tapped to draw another card. The holdings right now, it looks like 2 Find Finality. Those are not good enough here.
No, and even with the extra life, even casting Hydroid Krasis for X equals 4 would only put him up to 6 life. And I don't think that's enough to survive.
So there was a plus on Vraska. Doesn't like what he saw, and he's going to pack him up. Abe Corrigan's your winner, 2-1.